The house sat high above the city, glass walls looking out over lights that never slept. From the outside, it looked like a dream. Inside, it felt empty. Every room was quiet in a way that made people uneasy. Not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet, the kind that presses on your chest. The man who owned the house flew the world's richest and most powerful people across oceans. He was calm in the air, trusted with lives at 40,000 feet. But at home, he felt helpless. His twin boys lived under the same roof, ate the same meals, slept in the rooms next to his, yet it felt like they were miles away from him. The boys were 7 years old. They had not spoken a word in almost 3 years. Doctors said their bodies were healthy. Their hearing was fine. Their minds were sharp. They could read, write, and understand everything said to them. But when it came time to speak, nothing came out. Not even a whisper dot that started after their mother died. One day she was laughing with them in the kitchen. 2 days later, she was gone. An illness no one saw coming took her fast. The boys stood at the hospital, holding each other's hands, watching adults cry and talk in low voices. After that day, the words stopped Dot at first. Their father believed it was shock. Then grief. Then fear. He told himself they just needed time. He took time off flying. He stayed home. He talked to them, read stories, asked gentle questions. The boys listened. They nodded. They followed instructions. But they never answered back Dot as the months passed. Worry turned into panic. Specialists came to the house. Therapists tried games and pictures. Some pushed too hard. Some were too careful. None made a difference. The twins stayed silent, eyes alert, faces calm but distant. It was as if they were behind glass no one else could touch. The man did what he knew how to do when problems felt too big. He hired help. The first nanny came with strong confidence and a perfect resume. She spoke in a loud, cheerful voice and treated the silence like a challenge. She asked questions nonstop. When no answers came, she talked more. After 2 weeks, she quit, saying the house made her nervous. The second nanny stayed longer. She tried patience. She tried rewards. She tried pretending the silence didn't matter. One night, she called the father from her room, crying. She said the boys stared at her in the dark, without speaking, and she couldn't sleep anymore. After her, there were many others. Some lasted days. Some lasted weeks. None lasted long. They all said similar things when they left. The boys were polite but distant. Too quiet. Too watchful. The house felt sad, heavy, wrong. A few hinted that the children were strange. One even suggested boarding school. That comment stayed with the father for a long time. He refused to give up on his sons. But with every nanny who left, his fear grew. He was gone for days at a time, flying international routes. He needed someone he could trust. Someone strong enough to stay out at night. After the twins were asleep, he sat alone in the living room, staring at family photos on the wall. In the pictures, the boys were laughing. One had his mouth open mid-sentence. The other looked like he was telling a secret. The father would sit there and wonder if he would ever hear their voices again. One evening, after another nanny quit without notice, he stood in the kitchen holding his phone. His assistant had sent a list of new candidates. All highly trained. All expensive. All perfect on paper. He felt tired just looking at it. The next day, he stopped by the private airfield early before a flight. A storm had delayed departures, and the hangar was busy with workers moving equipment and checking planes. As he walked past the maintenance area, he noticed a man sitting on a metal bench, tying his boots. The man looked out of place and yet completely at ease. He wore simple work clothes, worn but clean. His posture was straight, like someone used to discipline. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't on his phone. He just sat there quietly, watching the rain hit the concrete. Nearby, two mechanics argued loudly about a tool. The man on the bench didn't react. He stayed calm, focused, steady. Something about that caught the pilot's attention. Later, while checking on paperwork, he overheard someone mention that the quiet man was looking for extra work. A widowed single father. A veteran. Someone reliable, they said. Someone who didn't complain. The idea came suddenly, almost by accident. That night, back at the house, the twins sat at the table eating dinner. One pushed peas around his plate. The other carefully lined up pieces of chicken. Their father watched them, trying not to show the ache in his chest. "What if," he said softly, more to himself than to them, "we tried someone different?" The boys didn't respond, but one of them glanced up, just for a second. The next morning, he asked his assistant to call the man from the airfield. When the man arrived at the house a few days later, there were no big expectations. The father almost felt embarrassed. This wasn't a trained nanny. This wasn't a child expert. This was just a man who had lived life, lost someone, and kept going. They sat across from each other in the living room. The father explained everything honestly. The silence, the nannies, the fear. "I don't expect miracles," he said. "I just need someone who won't leave." The man listened without interrupting. When the father finished, he nodded slowly. "I won't force them," the man said. "And I won't be scared of quiet." That was all. The twins stood at the hallway entrance, watching. Their faces showed no emotion, but their eyes missed nothing. The man didn't look at them right away. He didn't smile too big. He didn't wave or speak loudly. He simply knelt down and placed a small toy car on the floor between them. Then he gently pushed it forward. The car rolled across the floor and stopped near the twins' feet. The house stayed quiet, but for the first time in a long while, the quiet felt different. Didn't feel heavy. It felt like something was about to begin. The first week passed without any big moments. No sudden words. No tears. No breakthroughs that movies like to show. And yet, something inside the house began to change. The man arrived every morning before sunrise. He parked his old car neatly by the gate and walked in with the same calm steps. He never rushed. He never acted like he was proving anything. He treated the job the way he treated everything else in his life, steady and serious. The twins watched him closely. They noticed how he removed his shoes without being told, how he washed his hands before touching anything in the kitchen, how he spoke softly to the house staff, thanking them for even small things. They noticed that he never raised his voice, not even when something went wrong. Most of all, they noticed what he didn't do. He didn't ask them questions. He didn't say things like, "You can talk to me," or "Use your words." He didn't look disappointed when they stayed silent. He acted as if silence was normal, even welcome. In the mornings, he made breakfast the same way every day. Simple food. Warm food. He placed the plates on the table and sat with them, eating quietly. Sometimes he hummed a low tune, barely loud enough to hear. Sometimes he said nothing at all. The father watched from a distance when he could. When he wasn't flying, he stayed home more than usual, pretending to work while actually paying attention to every small detail. He saw how the twins no longer rushed through meals, how they didn't ask to leave the table early. One afternoon, the man found a broken stool in the garage. One leg was loose, the wood cracked. He carried it inside and sat on the floor fixing it with simple tools he brought from his car. He didn't announce what he was doing. The twins sat nearby, pretending not to watch. He worked slowly, explaining nothing, just letting the sounds fill the room. The scrape of wood, the soft tap of a hammer, the quiet focus of someone fixing something that mattered. When he finished, he placed the stool upright and pressed down gently to test it. Then he stood up and went to wash his hands. One of the twins walked over and sat on the stool. It held. The father saw this from the hallway and felt his chest tighten. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Trust didn't come in loud ways. It came like this. That night, a storm rolled in without warning. Thunder shook the windows. The lights flickered once, then stayed on. The twins froze where they were, their bodies stiff, eyes wide. The man didn't rush to them. He didn't act alarmed. He simply walked to the window, looked outside, and spoke calmly. "Big storm," he said. "It'll pass." He sat on the floor near the couch and leaned back against it. He didn't tell the boys to come closer. He just stayed where he was. After a moment, one twin moved toward him. Slowly, careful. He sat a short distance. Away. Another thunderclap shook the house. The second twin crossed the room and sat beside his brother. The man stayed still. He rested his hands on his knees, breathing slow and steady. The storm continued, loud and wild outside. But inside the room felt grounded. When the thunder faded, the twins stayed where they were. That night, they slept without turning on extra lights. The next days followed the same quiet rhythm. Walks in the garden, short trips to the store, sitting on the porch watching birds land on the railing. The man spoke when needed, but never too much. His words were simple and clear. When one twin dropped a glass, it shattered on the floor. The boy froze, waiting for anger. "It's okay," the man said, already reaching for a broom. "Glass breaks. No blame." No sharp tone. The boy's shoulders relaxed. The father noticed something else too. The twins began staying in the same room as the man, even when they didn't have to. They sat near him while he read. They followed him from room to room, quiet shadows that kept their distance, but never left. One evening, the father came home early from a flight. He found the man and the twins in the backyard. A small fire pit burned low, just enough to give warmth. The man was showing the boys how to roast bread over the heat using sticks. They listened closely, watched carefully. One piece of bread burned. The man laughed softly. "That one's gone," he said. The twins looked at each other. Then one of them smiled. It was quick, almost missed. But the father saw it. Later that night, the father invited the man to sit with him in the kitchen. He poured 2 cups of coffee. They seemed calmer. The father said quietly, "They're good kids." The man replied, "You're doing something different," the father said. "What is it?" The man thought for a moment. "I don't try to fix them," he said. "I just stay." The words stayed with the father long after the man went to his room. Days turned into weeks. The house felt warmer, not louder, but alive in a quiet way. The twins began drawing again, leaving papers on the table. Their pictures showed houses, trees, planes in the sky. One drawing showed 3 figures standing side by side. The father didn't ask questions. He simply hung it on the fridge. One afternoon, while the man was tying his boots to leave for the day, one of the twins stood nearby holding a small toy car. The boy hesitated, then gently pushed the car toward the man. The man looked up, surprised, and nodded. "Thank you." The boy didn't speak, but he didn't walk away either. That night, after the twins were asleep, the father stood alone in the hallway, listening to the quiet. It no longer felt heavy. It felt full. Something was happening. Slowly, carefully. And for the first time in years, the father allowed himself to believe that his sons were finding their way back, not through words, but through trust. By the 3rd month, the house had settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't loud or busy, but it felt steady, like a place that knew what it was doing. The twins woke up at the same time each morning and walked into the kitchen without being called. They sat at the table and waited, hands folded, eyes following the man as he moved around the room. He noticed everything. Which cup each child reached for, which chair they preferred, how one twin liked his toast darker while the other pulled off the edges. He didn't point these things out. He simply remembered. The father was flying more again. His work demanded it, but leaving no longer filled him with the same fear. He called home each night, sometimes from different time zones, sometimes with bad connections. The man put the phone on speaker and sat nearby while the father spoke. "I'll be back soon," the father would say. The twins listened. Sometimes one of them would lift a hand and give a small wave. The father would smile at the screen and pretend his eyes weren't wet. One afternoon, the man took the twins to a small park not far from the house. It was quiet, mostly empty, with old trees and benches that creaked when you sat on them. He didn't rush them toward the swings. He didn't encourage them to play with other kids. He just sat. The twins explored on their own. They walked the path slowly, stopping to look at ants crossing the pavement. One of them found a smooth stone and held it tightly in his palm. A boy from another family ran past them, laughing loudly. The twins stiffened. The man noticed and spoke gently. "People can be loud," he said. "We can sit over here." They moved to a bench farther away. The twins relaxed. That evening, back at the house, the man pulled out a box from the garage. Inside were old photos and small items wrapped carefully in cloth. He spread them on the table. "These are mine," he said quietly. "From before." The twins leaned in. There was a photo of a woman smiling, her arm around the man's shoulder. Another of a small child on his back. A medal. A folded flag. The man didn't explain everything. He didn't tell long stories. He just named things when asked with a look. "My wife," he said. Touching the photo gently. The twins looked at the picture for a long time. Later, one of them brought a drawing from his room and placed it next to the photo. It showed a woman with long hair and two small figures holding her hands. The man nodded. "She looks kind," he said. That night, one of the twins woke up crying. It was the first sound like that anyone had heard from them in years. The man reached their room before the sound turned into panic. He sat on the floor beside the bed and waited. He didn't touch them right away. He let the crying rise and fall. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm here." The crying slowed. One twin reached out and grabbed the man's sleeve. The man stayed still, letting the boy decide how close he wanted to be. The next morning, the twins were tired but calm. The man made extra breakfast and said nothing. About the night, the father noticed the dark. Circles under their eyes during a video call. "They had a rough night," the man said simply. The father wanted to ask more. He didn't. A few days later, the father returned home earlier than planned. He walked in quietly and found the man sitting on the floor with the twins. They were building something with blocks. A careful structure, balanced and precise. One wrong move could knock it down. The father watched from the doorway. The man placed a block gently and leaned back. "Your turn," he said. One twin placed a block. It wobbled. The man didn't rush to fix it. The block held. The father felt something loosen inside him. That evening, the father and the man sat on the back steps while the twins played nearby. The air was cool, the sky turning orange. "They don't feel so far away anymore," the father said. The man nodded. "They were never far," he said. "They were just guarding themselves." The father looked down at his hands. "I was afraid I failed them." The man was quiet for a moment. "You stayed," he said. "That matters." The next week brought a setback. A therapist came for a scheduled visit. The twins stiffened as soon as she entered. She spoke gently, but her presence changed the room. The man stayed close, sitting on the floor instead of a chair. The therapist tried a few exercises. The twins followed instructions, but grew tense. One of them knocked over a chair by accident. The noise echoed. He froze. The man stood slowly and moved between the twins and the therapist, not blocking her, just grounding the space. "It's okay," he said calmly. "We can stop." The therapist agreed and left early. That night, the twins were quiet again, more distant. The father felt fear creep back in. The man noticed and said nothing. The next morning, he took the twins to the garage. He handed them rags and showed them how to wipe dust from shelves. "Slow," he said. "Careful." They worked side by side in silence. By the afternoon, the tension had faded. Later that week, the father overheard something unexpected. He was walking past the twins' room when he heard a soft sound. Not crying, not humming, a whisper. It was quick, almost too quiet to understand. But it was there. The father stopped breathing. He didn't move. He didn't rush in. He stood there, letting the moment exist without pressure. Inside the room, the twins sat close together, heads bent over a book. One pointed at a picture. The whisper came again. The father stepped away, heart pounding. That evening, he said nothing to the man. He didn't want to turn hope into weight. But the man knew. He always knew. At bedtime, as he tucked the twins in, one of them looked at him and moved his lips. No sound came out. The man smiled gently. "You don't have to," he said. The boy relaxed. In the quiet house, something fragile was growing. Not words yet, but courage. And everyone felt it. The change did not come all at once. It came in small moments. It could be missed if someone wasn't paying attention. The house still stayed quiet, but the quiet no longer felt like a wall. It felt like space. The twins began to show small preferences. One liked sitting near the window during breakfast. The other preferred the corner of the couch where the sunlight reached in the afternoon. The man adjusted without comment. He moved plates. He shifted pillows. He let the day bend around them. The father noticed when he came home between flights. He noticed how the twins no longer stayed stiff when he hugged them. Their arms did not wrap around him yet, but they no longer froze. They leaned in. That was new. One evening, the man suggested a short trip. Nothing big. Just a drive to the edge of the city where planes passed low overhead. He explained it simply. "We can watch," he said. "If you want." The twins looked at the father, then back at the man. They nodded. They stood behind a fence near an open field. The sound of engines grew louder, then softer, as planes passed above them. The wind moved their hair. The ground vibrated lightly. The father stood a few steps back, giving space. The man stood beside the twins, hands relaxed at his sides. One plane flew low and slow. The twins lifted their faces to the sky. The man spoke quietly. "Your dad flies those." The twins glanced back at their father. For the first time, pride showed on their faces. That night, one of the twins brought a picture to the father before bed. It showed a plane in the sky and 3 small figures below it. The father swallowed hard and thanked him. Later that week, the man found an old box while cleaning the storage room. Inside were items that belonged to the twins' mother. Scarves, a notebook, a small music player. He didn't open the box right away. He carried it to the living room and placed it on the floor. "These were hers," he said simply. The twins sat across from him. Their hands rested on their knees. The man opened the box slowly. He didn't touch anything without pausing first, as if asking permission without words. He lifted a scarf and let it fall back into place. The twins leaned closer. One of them reached out and touched the fabric. The man nodded. "She liked music," he said. He turned on the small player. A soft song filled the room. Not loud, not sudden. The twins stiffened at first. Then one of them closed his eyes. The song ended. The man didn't start another. That night, both twins slept in their beds without waking. The father felt something settle inside him. A few days later, the man's daughter came to visit. She was quiet like him, older than the twins, careful with her words. She didn't try to entertain them or ask questions. She sat on the floor and drew in a notebook. The twins watched her from across the room. After a while, she slid a pencil toward them. They accepted it. They drew together without speaking. The father watched from the kitchen, heart full and aching at the same time. That night, after the children were asleep, the father spoke. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. The man shook his head. "You already did," he said. "You trusted me." The father hesitated. "They almost spoke," he said quietly. "I heard it." The man nodded. "They will," he said, "when it feels safe." The next morning brought another challenge. A loud argument broke out near the front gate. A delivery driver raised his voice. The twins heard it from inside. One of them dropped to the floor, covering his ears. The man reacted instantly, but calmly. He knelt down, placing himself between the noise and the child. "It's okay," he said softly. "I've got you." The noise faded. The twins stayed frozen for a moment longer, then slowly reached out and grabbed the man's shirt. He held on. The father stood nearby, frozen himself, watching the moment unfold. Later that day, the twins stayed close to the man. They followed him from room to room. When he sat, they sat nearby. That evening, the man cooked a simple meal. As he placed plates on the table, one of the twins pointed to the wrong seat. The man paused. The twin pointed again, more firmly. "Oh," the man said. "You want me there?" The twin nodded. The man moved his chair. The father felt tears rise and looked away. That night, the twins played quietly in their room before bed. The man sat in the doorway, not entering, just present. One of the twins dropped a toy and whispered something to his brother. It was soft, broken, but it was a word. The brother nodded. The man didn't react. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He waited. The next day, the twins woke early and went to the kitchen on their own. The father followed quietly. One of them reached for a cup and stopped. He looked at the man. "Help," he whispered. The word barely carried sound, but it filled the room. The man nodded calmly and handed him the cup. The father turned away, covering his mouth. Nothing more was said that day. No celebration, no pressure, but everything had changed. That night, the father stood alone by the window, watching planes move across the sky. His sons were finding their voices, not because they were pushed, but because they were finally heard. Word did not disappear after that day. It didn't come back, strong or clear, but it stayed. Like a small light that refused to go out, the twins did not suddenly begin talking in full sentences. They did not tell stories or ask questions. But once in a while, when the moment felt right, a word slipped out. Sometimes it was barely louder than breath. Sometimes it was only half-formed. Still, it was real. The man never reacted the way people expect when a child speaks after a long silence. He didn't smile wide or clap or lean forward with excitement. He treated each word the same way he treated their silence. He accepted it. If a twin whispered water, he handed over the glass. If one said wait, he stopped. If nothing was said at all, he stayed just the same. That steadiness mattered more than anyone realized. The father watched closely. He felt joy rise in his chest again and again, but he kept it quiet. He remembered all the times pressure had made things worse before. Now he followed the man's lead. He listened more. He spoke less, One evening, the father prepared for a long flight overseas. He packed his bag slowly, feeling the familiar pull of worry return. As he zipped the bag shut, one of the twins stood in the doorway. The boy didn't look scared. He looked serious. "Go?" he asked softly. The father froze. "Yes," he answered gently. "I'll be back." The boy thought for a moment, and nodded. That was all. The flight felt longer than usual. The father checked his phone often, though there were no messages waiting. When he finally returned home days later, he entered quietly. The house smelled like fresh bread. The man was in the kitchen. The twins sat at the table, drawing. One of them looked up. "Home," he said. The father dropped his bag. He knelt down and pulled his sons into his arms. This time, they hugged him back. Not tight, but real. That night, the father couldn't sleep. He sat in the living room long after the house went quiet. The man joined him, sitting across with a cup of tea. "I don't know what happens next," the father said. The man nodded. "That's okay. I was thinking," the father continued, "about your future. About ours." The man waited. "I don't want you to leave," the father said. "Not when the contract ends." The man looked surprised, but he didn't speak. "I'm not asking you to be an employee forever," the father said. "I'm asking you to stay." The man looked down at his hands. "The boys come first," he said. "They already chose you." The father replied. The next weeks were filled with small victories. The twins began greeting the man in the morning with quiet words. They spoke to each other more, whispering while they played. Laughter came back slowly, uncertain at first, then stronger. The father heard it from his office one afternoon and had to step outside to breathe. Follow-up visit with the therapist went differently this time. The man stayed close, grounding the room. The twins spoke a few words when asked, and stopped when they wanted. No one pushed them. "They're healing," the therapist said afterward. "At their pace." One weekend, the man's daughter visited again. She sat with the twins on the porch while the sun set. They shared snacks. They talked quietly. The twins asked her a question. She answered. It felt normal. One evening, the father brought out an old video. It showed the twins when they were younger, laughing and running toward their mother. The room grew still as they watched. The father felt nervous. The man stayed calm. When the video ended, one of the twins wiped his face. "She loved us," he said. "Yes," the father answered, voice steady. "She did." The house felt full after that. Weeks later, during another stormy night, thunder rolled loudly across the sky. The twins flinched and looked at each other. "It's okay," one said. They stayed in their beds. The man sat in the hallway, listening, not needed the way he once was, and he was proud of it. One afternoon, the father took the twins back to the fence near the open field. Planes passed overhead. The boys pointed and talked softly to each. The father stood between them. One of the twins reached up and took his hand. Other took the man's. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Months later, when people asked how the twins found their voices again, the father never gave a big answer. He didn't talk about specialists or money or methods. He said one simple thing: they felt safe. And for the man who had walked into a silent house and stayed when others left, that was enough. The quiet had not disappeared. It had changed. It had become a place where love lived.